Hey guys, welcome to another week of the Unnamed Cyber Talk. Matt and Carl are MIA this week. Actually, Matt's sick and Carl's in the city or doing something. But it's me and Chris, and I asked Paul Hacker to join us today. Welcome, Paul. Just
Well,
tell us a
thank you
little bit
for
about
having
who
us.
you are.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Chris. So great name to have in cyber, right? Not so good on the golf course, but cyber's awesome. As I played golf on Sunday, and I realized I am really a hacker. So, yeah, thank you for having me. So I work for a company in New Jersey called Access Insurance Services. We are not Access Surplus or the Access Company that everyone thinks we are. We are independent, private brokerage, and we specialize in professional management and cyber liability. And about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I started getting more involved with cyber and just kind of fell in love with it. And at that time, as you know, that was during COVID, and that's when everything blew up. So what I do is I work with my clients. I work with Bob. Bob has helped me in the past with some of my clients on the security protocol piece, but I help my clients understand what their cyber liability is, and we provide them with multiple carriers on the cyber side to provide them with separate comprehensive policy that's going to meet their first and third party claims, such as they have a data breach and they get sued, that's going to cover them. And what I can tell you, since there's pre-COVID, insurance was really cheap. They didn't ask any questions on the cyber side. They didn't care about anything, but they wanted membership. Then COVID hit, and no one had security in place, no MFA, no EDR, no encryption at all. So hackers just sat back and shot fish in a barrel for a year and a half, and really got into a lot of stealing data and actually locking up systems for companies. Because of that, the insurance premiums that were so cheap pre-COVID blew up. They increased 50, 75, 100%, and they cut back on their limits because their capacity was shot, because those carriers experienced all those ransomware claims, all those business interruption claims, all those ransom claims. After COVID, companies wised up, maybe because of Bob and what he does, most likely, but they started getting on the bandwagon. Well, we should do multi-factor authentication. We should do endpoint detection response. Or if we're using MSP like Bob and Chris's company, maybe they should monitor the EDR and endpoint detection and response, so that if they see something, they can cut that off at the pass and not infect the entire network. But they wised up. They wised up on how to train employees. Bob does training. He's going to be doing some training for one of my clients. So,
Paul, it's been a couple of years since we actually sat down face to face. I remember I gave you a copy of the book.
Yes.
Chris is actually one of the other authors in this book, and he talks about testing in that book.
Right. And that book actually helped me, Bob, to get to understand a lot of the stuff I didn't understand. So I thank you for having lunch with me that day and giving me that book. And actually, for one of my larger retailers in Wisconsin, actually, Chris, the Insurance Center, they have about 10 to 15 producers and a bunch of account managers. I bought 20 of those books online, Bob. So you got a nice Christmas bonus there that 1 year. And I handed those out. And I don't know if they read them or not, but I learned a lot from that.
Cool. That's great to hear.
I have a question for you, and this is specific to something I'm going through. How do you feel on riders on insurance versus actually having a dedicated cyber liability policy?
Well, I don't think riders or value-added plans that are cyber programs that are part of general liability or errors and omissions policy, or if it's silent cyber, isn't going to cover you for what's going on from the cost of actual ransoms. 4 or 5 years ago, ransoms were $20,000. Today, the average ransom for a small to mid-size in your book is $200,000 just before you do forensics and data breach. So to answer your question, Chris, I think those days of having some cyber is not going to help you. You need to have a separate cyber policy, whether you work with your own broker or you go direct if you're large, or you work through us, you really need to have a hybrid combo between a security expert like you guys to help companies understand where their vulnerabilities are. They may not even know. They may think they have everything great. And I'll talk about Change Healthcare in a minute. But you also have to have someone who understands the policy language, because certain things it's amazing to me. I picked up a client. They had Coalition. It was Coalition FA, Corvus. Those are pretty much those three insurtech companies. Different. Actually, Travelers bought Corvus recently, but I just lost my train of thought there. So yeah, so it's
a full policy. Basically, a full policy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you really need to have a separate cyber policy, and $1 million limit is not going to cut it. But if you are serious as an employer, whether you're private, public, or in a municipality like a school or a town or a city, you really need to have more limits. And I'm not trying to sell you more limits. It's because of what's happening as you get larger, as you have seen, whether it's Change Healthcare, Ascension Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Anthem, Bank of New York, Bank of America. Now, these ransom and these demands are crazy. So Change Healthcare, they demanded $22 million on February 22nd. They got locked up. They couldn't. Not 600 providers, pharmacies could not fill a script. They would have to have the member either pay what, and then get reimbursed. For us and Blue Cross, Anthem Blue Cross, which is, they use them for eligibility at my urgent care center. They couldn't verify that we had coverage, so they said you got to pay out of pocket. Now, if we're fortunate enough, we both work and we have some money, not a lot of money, so we paid for it. And my wife saw that, but it was interesting that most of those people that couldn't afford it would go to the emergency room, and we were there anyway. So
I actually saw that firsthand in a CVS picking up a prescription. I got behind somebody who expected to pay $20, and they said, "Oh, that'll be $700."
Yeah, what are you going to do? It's crazy. You can't afford that. You can't. I mean, look. Our economy is not the best, not getting political at all, but our inflation is high. Mortgage rates are high. Everything's costs high. My pool water went up $50 from last year. It is what it is, right? So people can't afford that. And you would think I don't know how big it was. CVS is a big pharmacy. They could have gave them some of the medicine to hold them over, right?
Yeah.
Well,
but the guy actually called out over the counter. So, we can't get in because of a cyber issue.
That's the issue. Well, you knew what the issue was, right? So Change Healthcare was $22 million to get the encryption key. So I think they're still having problems, and Chris, you can probably attest to this. Because they're
they paid for them to not release the data, which didn't work.
They pay, right. The hackers are doing both. They're hackers. You would think, look, it's a big business. Hacking is a big business. And just think if you get a couple of Change Healthcares as a company in Eastern Europe or China or even in the States here, they can't find them on the dark web. So they're doing all their work there. But just think about it. You only need a couple of deals a year to make $50 to $100 million as a company. And what are you doing?
I'll take that one step further. I know providers that were affected directly by this. I have a company that was a customer of ours that may go to business because they used them for their payments and they're not getting paid.
Right.
They're so far behind on payments changes from actually processing them that they don't know if they can survive long enough for the payments to come in.
Yeah, it's really what United Healthcare, the parent company of Optum and Change Healthcare, their stock is over $500 a share, I think, and maybe has gone down a little bit. Right? They've got money. Can't they like front some of this stuff to help their customers? Something.
They did, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. And that is just one of like hundreds of recent ransomware and data breaches that we read about every day. And these things aren't they don't like finish in a year. It takes years to go through for how many computers does Change Healthcare have? A lot, right? How many servers, how many cloud things, and blah blah blah. You got to check all that stuff, and they may have bricking. On an insurance term, bricking is your computer's it doesn't work anymore. It's worthless. It's worthless as a brick. So they have to buy new servers and systems and things of that nature. So it is not a one-time thing, and sometimes the hackers come back twice or three times after that because they know how to get in there.
So obviously you can't talk about individual policies, but if the bad guys come in and brick the systems there, brick the systems, and the company has a policy that's going to cover that, do those policies typically also cover like business interruption, lost revenues because they're all bricked?
If bricking is just one piece of the policy, and that's probably a sublimit, because most cyber policies, we'll talk about 1 million, but let's talk about 3 million, and then getting excess, which is an umbrella over it to get you to 5 to 10 million. And many of these providers are being mandated by their vendors or customers saying, look, you need more cyber. But they don't want the lawyers making that decision, but the lawyers don't understand that the capacity is like capped. So you can't just get a $10 million policy or a $20 million policy. You've got to get a 3 and then build up on all that stuff. So bricking is one piece of it, but these policies cover first party and third party on a value add that Chris, you asked before. Those only cover third party, like you had a data breach, but they're only like $150,000 of coverage. Just social engineering today has to cut down from $500,000 to $250,000 by a policy, and you have to build up on that, get another policy on top of that, because social engineering is the way hackers are making their money, not only to create something, but then to extort that money from a ransomware event.
So you actually just mentioned, sorry, Chris, you just mentioned a term that a lot of people might not even realize. What is the difference between first and third party?
First party is something happened like to you, your system, something internally crashed, right? Or something happened. Third party is your the data that you house. Let's say Change Healthcare had all that PHI, private health information. I mean, the hackers stole 6 terabyte of data. I think the Library of Congress is 7 or 8 terabyte. So they almost had enough data as for the Library of Congress, right? So that data is golden to them. It's like a golden goose because they can do so much with that data to massage it. They have diagnosis codes. They know what drugs you're on. They know whatever. And they can go back to individually extort those individuals, or they can leverage the provider and threaten them as well. So that's nuts, right? So,
well, what I was gonna say is I've seen sublimits for like social engineering and like wire fraud be anywhere from between 12.5% to 25% of the policy, and it depended on the carrier. It depended on the carrier where that was. So like on $1 million policy, I've seen as low as 125,000. I've seen as high as 250.
Yeah, it used to be 500,000. You don't get 500,000 because standard is 250. And depending upon the industry, like real estate, because the wire transfers, something like an app, they would say, "Hey, we're going to drop the social engineering to 100,000." We had a client who had Coalition. They had 0 for social engineering. The board didn't know what he or she was doing. So I said, we got to get you, either we talk to Coalition to get you that built in on your renewal, or we move it to another carrier that's going to give you at least 250. Because having no coverage in that, it's like, I don't even have a great analogy to use. And whatever one I'm going to use is going to be inappropriate. So it's just like having no coverage.
Well, you're paying for a premium that's not really offering you probably what the highest like social engineering is probably the easiest way for your company to get a security incident. Right? Absolutely. It could be phishing or something like that. They're going to fall underneath that. And if you have no coverage, what if they blame it on social engineering as the attack? They're just not going to pay, right? I mean, that's the reality of it.
They're gonna say, hey, guess
Yeah.
what? You don't have coverage there. Then what happens is the client will turn around to the broker and sue the broker's errors and omissions and say, look, you screwed up here. We thought we had coverage here. So you see that's the problem with cyber. There are property and casualty brokers are great with commercial property, commercial auto, umbrellas, workers' comp, but when it comes to cyber, it's all Greek to them. Cyber is a very, I think, a very unique product from an insurance perspective. A lot of different vernacular, and you have to understand the concept first. Many brokers go through wholesalers. We have a wholesale division. We do some great work on there, but there's other wholesalers like RT Specialty and CRC Sweat and Amwins and Burns and Wilcox. So brokers who work with them on their other stuff, they'll give them the professional side, the errors and omissions, the management, directors and officers, and also cyber. But you have to understand at least the concept of cyber as a broker. If you do not, you're setting yourself up for a rather large claim and possibly losing that client because you don't know what you're doing. So I think the next generation of people like me, you've got to have a combo of understanding the policies, and you have to understand the security pieces and the ramifications on having that security in place. And there are some good brokers out there that are like me. I don't think the majority, I'm not dissing anybody, but I don't think the majority of the brokers in cyber really know what they're doing. It is a unique product, and you have to understand all the moving pieces to it. And if you don't, you're setting yourself up for a major claim.
Yeah, and that's what I've seen with helping customers just like navigate. Like we don't fill out the form or anything like that, but we'll look at it with them and be like, okay, this sublimit's probably too low for what you're doing. Like you got to think about this, talk to your agent, and then their agent really can't help them at all.
The agent has to go back
crazy.
to the wholesaler. They have to go back to the wholesaler. And the wholesaler is there are great wholesalers out there, but if you're just banging out quotes every day, what's your service from a product knowledge share? I think some wholesalers do webinars and seminars, and that's great. But I think if you slice and dice the brokerage community, and I'm stretching this, I would say 80% don't know what they're doing with cyber. I mean, it's kind of like self-insurance. If you ask take a typical broker selling employee benefits, who's selling an Aetna, United Healthcare standard product, no self-funding whatsoever, when they get to some sort of self-funding or self-insurance, they're like, they have no idea what they're doing. And then they go to a general agency on that side to help them with that, So
to flip it over to IT for a second, I think your 80% rule. We can go. Let's just stick with Pareto's principle here, 80-20 rule.
Right.
I think the same thing applies in IT for IT people and providers that actually totally understand cybersecurity or have an understanding.
Absolutely.
I think it might be 20% of the people out there that actually do IT that actually have any idea of what they're doing or at least know where to go to get it.
I agree with you on that. There are some massive MSPs out there, and they're using CrowdStrike, or they're using Kroll, or they're using somebody, but you have to be set up to when something goes off, an alarm goes off, you got to respond to that, whether it's 2 a.m. or 1 whatever the time is, because timing is of the essence here. Once 200,000, 500,000, 1 million, 20 million money goes over that wire somewhere, you have to know that's happening and intercept that, because the longer you wait, the less of the likely you're going to get that money back.
Let's take it one step further. CrowdStrike, great product, right? Any endpoint detection response product out there is going to be a good product. What does that do if somebody takes your company information and shoves it into an AI system that then broadcasts it to the world? What happens if somebody's credentials get stolen and they just log in?
Mm-hmm.
None of these tools solve that problem. None of these tools address the true cybersecurity problem of being at the administrative level. being at the policy level, strategy level of the company. And that's my biggest problem with cybersecurity in general. Just the way it's sold is everybody wants to sell a tool, but the tool is strategy. The tool isn't just like, here's a cybersecurity tool and you just go with it. You need a strategy behind the business.
And I totally agree with that. And you have to become an advisor. So not only are you an IT advisor, you know all the moving pieces. And first, let's find out where the holes are in your system, because you can have the best policy in the world, but you're just bleeding. You're getting hit at, once, twice, three times. And let's face it, you know, investors in private companies and public companies, if there's a cyber situation and the money drops, the investment drops, they're suing that company. They're suing not based on the cyber. They're suing on the cyber incident, but they're going after the directors and officers policy. They're going after the C-suite to say, you guys and girls should have known better. You said you had all this in your blah, 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 your FTC, whatever, FCC filing. You have this, but you actually didn't have it.
So actually, let's back up there for a second. So the cyber policies are not necessarily a get out of jail free card for leaving the windows open then, right?
It's not, and some carriers will as they're doing their investigation from a data breach side and a forensic side, because all that stuff is baked in the policy. They have contracts with Mullen Coughlin, whoever, the lawyers around the country that really specialize in the data breach side. And then there's the forensic people, which are separate, right? The carriers are going to say, look, we paid out X millions of dollars. We're only making X minus that. We're not renewing you. And the reason we're not renewing you is because we don't feel that all the things you say you're doing, you're actually doing. And some companies are uninsurable because of that. They may say on the application they do all this stuff, and they're gonna know. And even at Travelers now with Corvus, it's not like Big Brother, but they monitor the traffic and they understand, hey, you didn't update your software, blah, blah, blah. Oh, by the way, there's an RDP, remote desktop protocol window open somewhere. They're going to find potential holes, but they're not doing what you all are doing, But still, with all that stuff, they have to, insurance company may say, we're not renewing, or we're going to bang you pretty high in a renewal and limit your limits and increase your deductible, or another ransomware event that we're going to pay for. We're going to put some skin in the game. So you're going to pay 10% of that cost. So it's kind of like a co-insurance.
It's like car insurance, right? If you get a bunch of speeding tickets and you crash your car a bunch, your insurance is going to be either really expensive or they're just going to go, we're not insuring you.
Absolutely.
It's the same. That's probably the best analogy out there for people.
Paul, one of the things we talk to people, one of the ways that we explain cyber insurance right now is it's another compliance requirement that's sitting out there, because everyone's got it could be FTC, it could be HIPAA, it could be PCI, but all businesses really that have cyber policies now have to comply with that policy in order for it to get paid. So how important is it for those companies to maintain documentation of what they're doing?
It's crucial. They have to show, they're paying Bob Mitchie's firm, Metro MSP, for training, and this is what we did for training. And it's not a one and done. We have in our company, we work through an MSP in New Jersey. All right. And my boss, Mike Smith's a great guy, and he tests us. He pays them to test us through social engineering. And a lot of the new people get hit because they think that, oh, Mike needs something, I got to do this now, not even thinking, well, Mike, we never asked you to do that, So you have to document. And what we do is we actually, I'm 20 days to finish the training. I haven't done it. I'm the last one in my company. Whatever. They tell me, you haven't done your training yet. I'm like, I'm working on it. I'm sorry. Been busy. but if you have to document that and they monitor this, and if you actually go to the email they send you as a test and you click on it, it's not like a clown going, how we got you. They will put you back in school. You got to go back to the training and
Yep.
understand. And that's how it's the carrot and the stick. You know, you got to do this. You really want to do that training again, but you have to do that because 90% of all hacks, whether it's a data breach and or ransom, is someone clicked on an email they thought that was legitimate. And that hasn't changed. And things look really real. But I know that Microsoft 365 email I just got this morning it's not for me. I know when I get an email from my bank, it's not from my bank because I know, and it's not. And they 3 or 4 years ago, you knew because it was capital, lowercase. You knew someone from a different language was trying to write English, and they didn't know what the hell they were doing. But today, it looks real, and you guys can talk about the deepfake that happened in China or Japan,
Hong Kong. Hong Kong.
You guys can talk about that. That was crazy.
I want to touch on something real quick from last week when I talked about Microsoft Recall. Switch it up a little bit.
Go for it.
Paul, if you didn't hear about this, so Microsoft has new PCs coming out. Actually, they're new PCs anyway. They have AI accelerators built into them so they can do local AI versus in the cloud. And one of the features that Windows is rolling out is Recall, which is going to take pictures of your screen over and over again and store it. So this is kind of the people in the security industry are kind of freaking out about it. And to a good point, after they start diving into it right now, some of the things that Microsoft said that the way they were protecting it doesn't seem to be necessarily true. And that could be on a pre-release software. But anyway, somebody wrote a piece of software that can go in and take those screenshots and extract data from them. And they called it Total Recall.
Total Recall.
And I love that so much. I love that so much. And it can go into the database that Microsoft is using. And now you would have to have a piece of malware on the machine. The person would have to be logged in because it is encrypted when the computer's off. But when the person's logged in, that person has full access to it. So yeah, but they call it Total Recall. It can actually read the database and pull any information out of it. So as we go forward, obviously that's a security risk because it doesn't limit passwords. There's a password on the screen, you can capture it, but you can go in and tune it and say, hey, this application isn't part of Recall.
That takes effort, though, Chris.
Right. Well, exactly right. But the security implications of this are serious.
And Chris, I actually sat with the security team yesterday. They've already developed a scanner for it.
Yeah.
Well,
It's wild because that these first initial devices aren't necessarily business devices. They're called that, but like a lot of them run Windows 11 Home, so it's gonna be personal people doing this. So you want to be careful about that. But Total Recall. It's such a.
That's going to be the new question on the insurance apps. Do you have Microsoft Recall disabled in your environment?
Yeah.
And what about the home PCs? Because if we take this one step further and say, okay, we got all these work-at-home employees now that are using their own equipment. Well, Recall is being deployed initially on home PC, home Microsoft home computers. So people working at home now, we've got an easy way to get the screenshots of what they've been doing.
Well, you answered my question. Do I get my daughter a Windows-based computer for college or a Mac? I guess we're getting a Mac. She's going to UConn for nursing in the fall. So I think I'll spend $3,000 for the Mac versus the $1,500 that she's secured. You haven't heard anything about Macs having this problem, right? I haven't.
Not this specific problem, but there's been
Macs
plenty
had
of
other. Yeah, I was gonna say Macs have other infos too.
There's been plenty of problems there. I always tell people what is the school really using and recommending instead of dropping in one or the other, because you never know what's going on.
Well, the school gave us the option, but they have to have certain memory, has to have the camera and all that stuff. So
the device doesn't necessarily matter if you're updating it properly. It's more about what you install on it, how you use it, and things like that. Because that matters more than anything, and then the feature set you want, and then obviously the budget price.
I was just thinking from a support perspective of campus applications and things. If you go to
most things are in the cloud now, so I mean, they're using a browser. So.
Anyway, we ran really long today.
That's because I talk too much. I apologize.
No, it's good stuff, and people, Chris and I typically will go on a rant about something else, and talking about the insurance side of it's so important because people think they've got coverage just because their BOP policy's got $10,000 worth of coverage, and right now I'm like, I can't tell you how much insurance you have. That's between you and your insurance agent, but
Yes.
we want to see much more than that.
Well, any potential clients or current clients you want to have one-off calls on to answer questions, I'm open to that, whether I get the business or not. So it's all about sharing knowledge.
You heard it. We're gonna get his meeting link. We're gonna put it in there, and you guys just blow his calendar up if you're listening to this.
So, Paul, before we get off, why don't you tell people how they can reach you?
Yep. Okay. Real simple. I'm on LinkedIn always on probably too much. But they can call me on my cell 845-255-8044, or they could email me simple phacker at my company, which is AXISINS.com. So again, thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. My family tells me I talk too much when we go out to dinner and meet people, but it is what it is.
Man, we appreciate you jumping on here.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
This is good work, guys. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, you have a good day. Thank you very much. All right.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.